Hello, I'm Chris Hornby. I've already published a single or dual extruder for the Hobby King Fabrikator on Thingiverse, but I've had a bit of feedback saying that it's a bit difficult to thread, to change filament when you need to do so. So I've upgraded the design, hopefully to overcome that difficulty. So this is what you need to do. If you've got a Hobby King Fabrikator, then you need to first of all print the parts that you need. That's the two extruder parts and possibly the mount to mount it onto your printer. When you've printed those, then you can dismantle the extruder head, the direct drive extruder head, and recover the stepper motor. That's a Nema 17 stepper motor. The hobbed wheel, which is a 14mm hobbed wheel. The bearing, which is a 13mm with an inside diameter of 5mm. A couple of washers to go either side of the bearing. Now there is a shaft that goes through the middle of the bearing with a couple of circlips on either side. If you're making this for any other printer and you don't have that part, you can just as easily use a short 5mm bolt for that. And the other thing you need to rescue is the spring. If you haven't got the spring, the dimensions are 8mm diameter and 32mm length. Now those easily come by on eBay. In addition to that, you'll need three M3 by 20 bolts and one M3 by 10 bolt and a couple of M5 bolts by, looks like 22mm. Okay, so those are the parts that you need. If you've already got your fabricator, then you can just reuse the parts from your old extruder. If you haven't got that printer, then rescue what parts you can, and you need to purchase the additional parts. I'll put a parts list in the on the Thingiverse site. If you want to make a dual extruder, obviously you'll need two sets of each of these things to make two. I've already made one, that one, and I'm going to make the other one now, show you how to do it, and then we'll mount it on the printer. By the way, I'm assuming that you're using an E3D V6 nozzle for your Bowden setup, or something similar, maybe a Chinese copy. The only problem I've found is with that extruder, if you get it from E3D, the Bowden connector that they supply is a plastic one, and it allows the PTFE tube to go all the way through, and after you've printed maybe a dozen parts or something like that, it creeps through and eventually snarls up the drive. So I've replaced the one that's supplied by E3D, the cheap plastic thing, with one of these brass connectors, which you can get on eBay, and they're described as a brass pneumatic Bowden connector. I don't know what's pneumatic about it, but there you go. And that stops the PTFE tube from creeping. So I've replaced that with that. Now the first thing we need to do is start working on assembling the extruder. We need to tap this hole so that it accepts the Bowden connection. Now if you've got a suitable tap, I think it's a, I can't remember, yeah, 9mm tap. If you've got a 9mm tap, all well and good, but you can just use the pot to tap the hole. Just line it up nicely, start screwing it, and when it starts biting in, just tighten it up with a spanner. You can use machine tool lubricating compound if you've got any, or just a bit of candle wax or Vaseline, or just use it naked as I am. So that needs to be screwed in, tapped in and screwed in. I'll do that now. Anyway, let's get a little bit stiff, so I'll start, find the right spanner, tightening it up, and you tighten that up all the way in. There you go, done. Don't over tighten it, you might split the part. Then you get one of the 5mm bolts that I talked about, preferably hex bolt like that, and that taps into the other hole, and again you can use the 5mm bolt to do the tapping. On one of these bolts, I don't know if you can see that on the screen, but I've milled away the edges so we've got a conical edge there. That is because that bolt has to fit into and turn inside the head of the next bolt, and that's the mechanism that tightens the spring. So we'll get the one that we've sharpened and tap that into the other hole. Here we go, that's bitten. Get a hex key and tighten it through. Don't tighten it all the way to the head, just tighten it up so that it starts peeking through the other side. There you go, it's just peeked through the other side, and there we've prepared that bit for the, as far as the tapping is concerned anyway. The next thing we need to do is to mount the ball race there. So I'll get my shaft. I've already clipped a circlip on one end of the shaft. If you haven't got one of these shafts, use a 5mm bolt. There's not a lot of room for the head, so the bolt should really have a flat head like that bolt, or you might have to grind down the head a bit so that it fits. Anyway, I'll offer that up and just get it to bite. Just get it to go through the first hole. There you go. It's a little bit tight. If it is tight, then get a 5mm drill. There you are, like that, and just open it out a bit. Just clean it out. It might be a bit tight because of the printing. The printing might not have given you a completely clean hole. Okay, let's hope that goes in. Just clean it out. Clean it out. Get my shaft. Offer it up. There, that's good. That's gone through the first bit of the hole. Now I need to get the ball bearing in there with a washer either side. Now what I do is I get a bit of Vaseline, put a bit of Vaseline either side of the bolt, sorry, either side of the bearing. If you don't do this, it's almost impossible to get the bearing and the washers located in place. So we stick the washers there, stick the other washer there, We've stuck the washers either side of the bearing, slide the bearing into place, and then drive it through. Okay, that was a little bit more fiddly than I thought it was going to be, so I stopped the camera, but now I've pushed it through and there's a circlip on either side, and just make sure that that runs very smoothly, that the wheel runs very smoothly. And that's that part of the build repaired. Now the next bit's a bit fiddly, so I hope I can do it without any mistakes. We get a 5mm bolt and push it through the base plate there. Push it right through until it reaches the end, so it's coming through. We get a, so that wasn't a 5mm bolt, it was a 3mm bolt by M3 bolt by 20. Now we get an M3 bolt by 10 and stick it through there. Make sure it goes all the way through there, and another M3 bolt by 10 in that corner, and we're now ready to mount the base plate on the motor. Place that over the motor. Now we really need the wires of the motor to be facing the back, so if we look at the one that I've already done, the fat base of the base plate points in the same direction as the wires. Offer that up to the motor and screw it in. Speed up the video at this point. Now that the base plate has been screwed on firmly, all that remains to do is to assemble the moving arm. So first of all we get the spring and we place it in that hole there. We get one of the 5mm by 20mm bolts, thread it through there. Now get the arm, make the head of the bolt match, slot into that bolt there, and we'll get the last 20mm 20mm long M3 bolt, and that is the bolt that's going to be the axis for the moving arm. So we don't want that to unscrew during use, so we put a little bit of thread lock just on the tip of that. There you go. And that bolt goes through there, all the way through, line it up nicely, and we're going in. Screw it up until it reaches the limit of its travel. Not too tight, you don't want to damage the plastic. Loosen it back a quarter of a turn and make sure that the arm still moves. Now that, the thread lock will tighten up on that, and we'll be okay. So the last thing that we need to do is to slot in the hobbed bolt, which goes over the axle there. Now we need that to be fairly accurately located. This is how we do it. Turn the stepping motor until the indent, or the retent as they call it, is facing towards you. Get your hob bolt, have the grub screw facing towards you, and slot that over. And it needs to be at such a height that it's located more or less in the middle of the bearing. So now when we thread the filament through, it will go right through the middle. So I'm going to do that now. Thread the filament through, and I haven't got any PTFE in there yet, so it won't locate itself accurately. So I'll just do that with a pair of tweezers. Actually, I'll put a bit of PTFE tubing in there so it can locate itself accurately. There we go. There we go, I've located it through there. Now, that is the extruder complete, and when you want to thread the filament, there's no need to heat up the hot end and advance the filament exceedingly slowly using the interface. All you need to do is squeeze these two arms together with the finger grips, and then the filament will feed easily through. There we go, just feed it all the way through to the end, and that's how you feed it. Now the last thing that we need to do is to mount the extruders into the printer mount, and that's fairly easy to do. You need two more 10mm long M3 bolts. Place each extruder in its mounting. Obviously, if you've only got one extruder, there's only need to print out one of these mountings. Bung them in, make sure the wires go through the slot there. And now all we need to do is tighten it up. Now you take a 10mm M3 bolt, go in from the right hand side because it's got a larger hole there, and tighten it up into the smaller hole, threading its own path, 3mm path, and just tighten that up, and that will hold the motor in firmly. And do the same with the other one. Okay, so now that's the two extruders completed. Obviously if you only made one, you only made one. There's a couple of holes in the mounting plate at the bottom there which match up with the various screws on the frame of the Hobby King Fabrikator printer, and we just utilize those screws to mount it. I'll just mount this one quickly now, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's mounted. Okay, I've mounted the two extruders on the printer. If you've only got one, it doesn't matter, you just need to mount one. The next thing, or almost the last thing we need to do, first of all thread the filament in so it goes through, and make sure that the hob bolts are lined up nicely with the filament. When they are, just tighten up the grub screw on the hob bolts, and the last thing you need to do is to adjust the feed tension on the filament. So for that you need a hex key, and you tighten it up, tighten the bolt up, the 5mm bolt up, until it just starts to grip the filament. At the moment it's just starting to turn the hobbed wheel, but it's slipping a bit, so turn it another half turn. There we are. Perhaps it's still slipping a bit, just tighten it up a bit more, another half turn. And there you are, the filament is moving the hobbed wheel. Okay. So now we need to feed the filament all the way through to the hot end. Now don't push it through, because that will turn the hob bolt, which will generate maybe enough electricity to blow up your Arduino board. So you don't want to do that. So what you do is you pinch these two finger indents together. That will loosen off the filament, and you can now push it all the way through to the hot end. It'll stop when it reaches the nozzle. Right, that's that one fed. It's reached the nozzle. Now do the other one. Pinch together, feed through. So you see that's feeding through without turning the hob bolt. And we feed that through until it reaches the resistance of the hot end. There we are. So those are ready. Now you're all ready to print now. There's only one other thing I need to show you, and that is the actual plate mount for the hot ends, either for the E3D V6 or the, what do they call it now? Not the Medusa. Anyway, the double-headed one. Chimera, that's right. That's the one I'm using here. I'll just put a photograph of both of them. You can print out the plates from my last entry in Thingiverse, and I will put the STL files for the plates on this project on Thingiverse as well. So you need to print out a plate for your hot end, and you've got a complete Bowden setup now for dual extruders. Next thing you need to do is configure your Marlin or whatever software you're using for your printer control board, and good luck with that. Thank you for watching my video.